Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how to be a profitable sports bettor using Prizepicks, a site where I've made almost $26,000, and other DFS sites. Now if you don't know what a DFS site is, it's a little different than a regular sportsbook. DFS stands for Daily Fantasy Sports. And what makes it a little bit different from a normal sportsbook is that you can't make regular picks. Everything has to be essentially a parlay, and the payouts don't shift the same way that they do on a regular sportsbook. So what makes DFS sites a little bit different from sportsbooks is that you have to make more than one pick for it to be a bet that you can make. So if I click on Kevin Durant to go over his points right here, you can see I can't currently make a bet. And then if I add someone else in, now I can place a bet. And what makes a DFS site a little bit different from a regular sportsbook too is that you are going to get the same payout no matter if you do Kevin Durant to go under his points, it's still going to pay $60 on a $20 bet. And then if I have him on his over, it's going to have the exact same payout. Same with if I do it on Cade Cunningham on his over points and his under points, you're getting the exact same payout. But if I go over to a sportsbook here, you can see I have Kevin Durant and Cade Cunningham, and if I put in for $20, you can see I get one payout. But if I then want to do Kevin Durant on his under points, then you're going to get a completely different payout of $231 versus $256. So this is the main thing that makes these DFS sites more exploitable than regular sportsbooks, is that you can get the same payout whether you choose the over or the under, and you're not getting that payout shift the same way that you are in a regular sportsbook. So before proceeding on to the rest of this video, some concepts you're going to need to know about is going to be positive EV sports betting and how to make profitable parlays. Now if you don't know about either of those, I'll have both videos linked down in the description of this video. Now what I use to take advantage of Prizepicks and these other DFS sites is I use the OddsJam fantasy page. And if you're interested in trying out the fantasy page for yourself, I'll have a link down in the description that's going to give you a week-long free trial of it. And if you use the promo code MENACE, it's also going to give you 35% off your first month if you decide to keep using it after that week-long free trial. Now the first method that I use to be profitable on Prizepicks and these other DFS sites is going to be using positive EV to make my parlays. Now if I go up here, it's going to show you for what type of bet that you do here on Prizepicks, what the odds are going to be for each pick within that parlay. So if I do a two-man power slip on Prizepicks, the odds of each pick is going to be minus 136 versus if I did like a six-man flex slip, the odds of each pick is going to be at minus 119. So if we go and look at this Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy pick, every single sportsbook on here, except for Fliff, which is usually off quite a bit on their odds anyways, but every single sportsbook on here has worse odds than if we did it on Prizepicks. So in the long term, that's going to win you more money. And if we go back up here to look at the odds per pick, depending on the slip that you choose, what you'll notice is that a two-man slip here on Prizepicks actually has some of the worst odds per pick depending on the slip that you do. And if you're someone that has been following these fake internet gurus that sells picks to people, what they'll often hype up is these two-man slips. And the reason why they hype them up is because they tell you that you're going to win more often with those picks, so then you're going to win long term. And that's only kind of half true. So with a two-man slip, yes, it is easier to win your bet than a six-man slip. And the reason is because you only have to get two right versus if I did like a five-man power, which only has odds of minus 122 per pick, you have to get all five picks right. So you're going to win more bets with a two-man slip than with a five-man power slip. But long term, you're going to have a mathematical advantage if you take advantage of one of these ones with lower odds, because it's going to have an actual positive EV value that's going to make you money long term versus these two-man slips typically are negative EV because you have to find picks that have a worse payout on the other books than minus 136, which typically is not that often. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to do an example that I'll actually bet on Prizepicks. And what I typically like to do is I like to do either a three-man power or a four-man flex. And the reason why is because it's giving you the same odds as a five-man power. And the odds are only slightly worse than something like a six-man flex or a five-man flex. And there's nothing wrong if you want to do a five-man flex or a six-man flex. Mathematically, it's better long term. I just prefer to do a three-man power or four-man flex because it's a nice even ground between having more winning slips while also not getting extremely terrible odds. So I'll go and click on this, the 3-man power. And what I also typically like to do is I like to make the minimum data points at least 2. And the reason why is because if you go and scroll over and look at this page bet, you can see she only has 1 data point that you're comparing against. And the problem with this is because there's only 1 data point to compare it to, you don't know if Prizepicks is the one that has its odds off or if Underdog here is the one that has its odds off. Same with if we look at this Sananda Fru bet. You don't know if it's Prizepicks that has the odds off or if it's Fliff that has its odds off. So if you have multiple books that you can compare it to, like this Puka Nakua bet, you can see that you're getting 20.5 fantasy points here on Pinnacle, you're getting 20.8 here on BetMGM, and you're getting 13.1 at minus 230 odds here on DraftKings. And Prizepicks is giving you 21. So you know that you're getting an advantage here on Prizepicks because you can look at these other books, see what they're offering, and see that clearly Prizepicks is the one that's off. Versus if there's only 1 data point that you can compare it to, you don't know which one is actually the book that's off. So I'll go right up here, and you can click whatever amount that you want in here. I typically like to see at least 2. You could do 3 or 4, but then that's just going to limit your amount of choices that you'll see pop up in the selection. So you'll see there's a lot of options here, and if we scroll down, we'll actually show that green is typically going to be your ones that are like really advantaged here on Prizepicks. Yellow is going to be kind of advantaged. It's not as good as green, but there's nothing that's wrong with it. And then if we scroll down some more, what you'll see pop up is going to be bets that show up that are red according to OddsJam. And typically you want to stay away from these, but it's not the end of the world if you use one of these. Like let's say I did a 5-man slip and 4 of them were green and 1 of them was from this red section. Typically it would still be a positive EV bet in the long run because those bets that you picked that were in the green section are going to be positive EV enough that it makes up for a bet from the red section. And if you look more closely at the red section, it's comparing the odds to OddsJam's own algo odds. So OddsJam here is saying for this Marvin Mims predictive model that his over 1.5 receptions, according to them, should be at minus 119.54. But if you compare it on Prizepicks here, you're actually getting the exact same odds on DraftKings and better odds than on these other books. So I would still honestly consider taking this bet, and that's to show you that not everything that shows up in this red section here on OddsJam's fantasy page is actually a bad bet. You just have to actually look at the odds to see that you're getting better odds on Prizepicks than on these other books. So this Marvin Mims bet, if you wanted to take it, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Honestly, if I had to use this in a bet slip, I definitely would. But we have a lot of bets here in this green section, so I'm going to look at using these. So we'll go and use this Puka Nakua one. And then I really like this Graham Ike one, and the reason why is because on Prizepicks you're getting over 31.5 points, rebounds, and assists. But then if you scroll over, you can see Underdog and Fliff are actually offering it at 32.5 at roughly the same value. So again, this is positive EV because you're getting roughly the same payout. In fact, the exact same payout on Underdog. And you only have to get over his 31.5 points, rebounds, and assists. So in this example, let's say you made this pick on Underdog and you made it on Prizepicks and he only got 32 points, rebounds, and assists. Well, you would lose this bet on both Underdog and Fliff, but on Prizepicks you would win. So this is definitely positive EV right here. And now that I've added him to my queue, what you'll notice is that he is added to my bet selection. And so this is a 2-man power slip. So it has a 32% chance of winning. But if you look at the total EV, it has a minus 3.68% EV. So for every $100 I bet, I'm going to be losing $3.68 long term. So yes, it has a higher chance of hitting and winning, but in the long term, mathematically, you're losing money on this. And then for the same reason that I chose this Graham Ike slip, I'm going to choose this bet here on Kyle Filipowski on his over points and rebounds. And the reason why is because FanDuel is typically pretty sharp, and they have it at minus 144, so you're getting quite the advantage on that. And your odds are only slightly worse on a couple of these other books at having an additional point added to his line. So I'm going to go with him. And what you'll notice is that once I make his selection, it has an 18% chance of winning, which is way less than that 32% chance of winning. But what you'll see is now long term, my positive EV is at 8%. So for every $100 I bet long term, I'm going to win $8 in profit. So yes, I have a less likely chance of this slip winning, but because of the odds shift from minus 136 to minus 122 by adding an additional slip to my bet, it now makes it profitable. And the nice thing about this fantasy section on OddsJam is that if I hit this bet button, it's going to take me right to the bet. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't work with the vast majority of the sportsbooks here on the fantasy page, but it does for Prizepicks. So if I click it, it's going to take me right to it. And now you'll see that Kyle Filipowski line was so off that it ended up switching to that 19.5 that we saw earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and remake a new slip. So now what I'll do is I'll just refresh it up here, and I know that the two other bets are still going to be on there. So we had this Puka Nacua one and Graham Mike are still up. And what you'll notice is for this Brock Purdy Sam Darnold pick, it's actually even more positive EV now because Fliff changed their odds from minus 111 to minus 129. So you're getting a clear advantage here on this bet. So I'm going to add this one to it. And now 18% chance of winning, and we have a 10% EV. So this one works out even more in our favor. And you'll also notice here it shows the EV for each pick that you're making. And going back to the parlay video I made, you'll notice that by stacking positive EV bets into a parlay, it actually makes your parlay more positive EV in the long term. So again, we'll try this again to see if all the bets are still there. It still is, so we're going to actually go and make this bet. And what you'll notice is if I try to do all $22 that I have in my account on here, it's actually not going to accept the bet. And the reason why is because I've actually made so much money on Prizepicks that they've limited me to only making $25 total in bets a day, and I've already made a couple bets a day. So we're just going to lower this down to a $5 bet so that we can actually get this in to show it to you guys. And just like that, now my bet is made, and long term I'm going to make $10 for every $100 that I bet if I made this bet a gazillion times. And so we'll go back right over to here, we'll change our wager size to $5, and now we'll add it to our bet tracker, that way it's tracking our bets and it will show that we've made this bet already. So now if I go and refresh it, so now it's going to pop up with these warning symbols showing that I've already made this bet. That way if I go to make another Prizepicks bet, I'm not going to pick it again. That way I don't have overexposure to the same bet, or I don't make a conflicting bet as well. The next way to beat DFS sites like Prizepicks is to make clips that are positively correlated. This means that if one event in the bet happens, then it is likely for another event in that bet to also happen. These bets can be really high EV. The only downside to them is that it can be time consuming to make these slips because you have to play around with them to avoid payout shifts, as well as compare them to other sportsbooks to make sure that your slip is positive EV. In this example, I'll choose Josh Allen to go over his passing yards line. And if I add to this slip his wide receiver Shakir to go over his receiving yards line, this is positively correlated because if Josh Allen goes over his expected passing yards, then it is highly likely one of his receivers will go over their expected receiving yards. On screen, I'll show you some stats that are positively correlated. There are more stats that are positively correlated than this. This is just to give you a starting point if you don't know too much about these sports. So skipping ahead to save on time, here's a positively correlated 4-man slip. For this Seahawks versus 49ers game, I have Darnold going over his passing yards, and I have McCaffrey going over his rushing yards. This is positively correlated because in football, typically when a team is losing, they pass the ball more, and then the winning team will run the ball more to try to run the clock out. So if I choose Darnold to go over his passing yards and sticking with that game script, I then have to choose McCaffrey to go over his rushing yards. Now I kept Josh Allen going over his passing yards, but to reduce a payout shift, I had to change Shakir from his over receiving yards to his over receptions line. This is still positively correlated because if Josh Allen goes over his passing yards, there's a decent chance that in order to achieve this, he has to have a higher number of pass attempts than expected, and if he has more passing attempts, then it's likely his receivers will have more receptions than expected. And when making positively correlated slips, you always want to compare it to other sportsbooks to make sure that your slip is actually positive EV. Here's almost the exact same slip on FanDuel for reference. Josh Allen's passing yards are 2 less on here, but Sam Darnold's passing yards are 2 more, and McCaffrey's rushing yards is 1 more on here. This bet on FanDuel is going to pay $153.55 for a $20 bet, But on Prizepicks, that same bet is gonna pay $180 for a $20 bet. So you're getting paid $27 more for the same bet on Prizepicks. This may not sound like a ton, but over time, this adds up to a lot of money. The final way to take advantage of Prizepicks and other DFS apps is to take advantage of discounted lines they offer, and this is because typically they are very positive EV. So if I click on this bet, you'll see that there was a discount on the number of saves he had to make. Unfortunately, with Prizepicks UI, you can't see what it was discounted from. Prizepicks will offer discounted lines every Tuesday, and it's just really profitable to use these discounted picks in your slips. Right now, Prizepicks has Curry's points line discounted from 26.5 to 21.5 points. And to show you how positive EV this is, I'll look up the odds for this line on OddsJam. So I'll go to basketball, NBA, and then the Warriors game. Then I'll search for points. And now I'll scroll down to Curry. Now that original line of 26.5 points has -105 odds for its best offered odds. But if I pull up the alternative lines and scroll to the 21.5 points line, that has odds of -470. And if I pull up the odds per pick by slip type, you'll see that the Steph Curry discount is so good, you can plug it into any slip type and that slip will still be positive EV, even for the 2-man slip. So with that, you now have 3 strategies I use to beat Prizepicks, and these strategies will also work with all these other DFS sites like DraftKings, Pick6, Sleeper, and Parlay Play. And the OddsJam fantasy page will also give you positive EV plays for some social sportsbooks and betting exchanges like Rebet, Onyx Odds, and Novik. And if you're interested in using the OddsJam Fantasy Optimizer, I'll have a link down in the description below. It's going to give you a week-long free trial. And if you use the code MINUS and decide to keep using the OddsJam Fantasy Optimizer after your week-long free trial is over, it's going to give you 35% off your first month. So with that, if you have any questions, just leave them down in the comments below and I'll make sure to answer them. And now that you have the tools, go out there and beat the DFS sites.